back to my channel. Don't be fooled by the Jane Davenport paint that's sitting in front of me. I'm actually just finishing something off, and I thought, well, I'll do it while I'm talking to you because multitasking, that's the word I'm looking for. I also wanted just to show you this is kind of the other way I've been doing my swatch cards lately, and the way I'll be doing the swatches that I'll be producing today. I've sort of taken a leaf out of Mrs. Vierick, Lindsay the Frugal Crafter's book, and started sticking the paint labels on because sometimes they've got useful information, saves me writing it down, and producing manufacturer by manufacturer swatches, whereas previously I used to do everything as like all the reds together, which I'm still doing, so all the reds by all the brands are all still swatched together, and I'm moving over to a kind of Jem Maguire style using coin holders, so I can have individual swatch cards for every red, and then I can keep them in order as the different paints come out and I get new paints. I can keep my cools and my warms and my neutral reds, for example, in order, and I'm not limited. But manufacturer by manufacturer, manufacturer by manufacturer, I'm finding useful for when I'm doing review purposes rather than when I'm painting, because it allows me to compare within a manufacturer or across manufacturers. So I re-swatched my Jane Davenports in that style. So what I've been curating on them is the label, just because they're cute, the type, the name, the light fastness as given by Jane in her website. The pigments, I've done a swatch over black pro marker, and then I've just done a sort of normal swatch. And these are very, very bloomy swatches because I don't really care. I'm just trying to show that what the relative colours are like. And this is a hot press watercolour paper, specifically one from Aquafine. It's just a cheap student one because it doesn't matter. It's a swatch card. And I've put an asterisk in a circle where they're single pigment colours just to help me spot the single pigments. Now, today I'm going to be doing a set of paints actually that I've been curious about for quite a long time. I have been toying, and I've been asked by a lot of people to review these for quite a long time, and I haven't done it. And they are one of the more expensive watercolour lines on the market, and they are not one that I've used before. I have some of their products, I have some of their mediums or media, but I don't have their paints until now. And the reason I decided to take the plunge and do this is demand. People have been asking me to do it, but also because my own kind of need. So I've just realised where I've actually put the paints right in front of me. I'm doing a whole series, I'm chain filming reviews one by one, and then I'll upload them in bits. I have been using for my en plein air work for some time in the summer. You'll see videos in the iCards up there of when I sort of first decided to commit to doing more en plein air in the summer. And when I work en plein air, I'm usually sketching, okay? So I don't need expensive paint, I need cheap paint that I won't be afraid to use up, and so on. So what I've been using has been a Cotman Sketches set, which is a Cotman Studio set, which is the 40 odd half pan Cotman sets, about £40. If you go to the link up there in the iCards that I've just shown, you can buy it from the video description if you're interested. It's a really good value student set, and I really, really recommend it. And I've got the little Cotman Sketches set that holds 8 half pans, and I was just taking 8 colours from the big set, or 12 colours from the big set, depending where I was going, if I was doing sea or land or buildings, pick the colours and take that. Then I wanted to kind of force myself to use limited palettes, and rather than going with the old faithful warms and cools, blah blah blah, what I started doing was taking things like the Prima sets, and you know, these have got relatively sort of all within a theme colours within them. They're great for sketching, they're not bad quality paints, they may not be fine art quality paints, but they're great for sketching in the wild. And what I noticed when I came back to the studio and decided I would actually turn something into a painting was that two things kind of happened. One is that, you know, the sketches I'd done were like little studies and I could use them to create a painting, and that was fine. The other thing that happened was that I'd really like the original that I'd done, and it had an immediacy to it that I couldn't capture by redrawing it, but it wasn't done in high enough quality paint to ever be able to really do anything with it. So I've had a desire for some time now to have a high quality set for en plein air. And what I was doing again, which I think I've shown in previous videos, and I don't have it on my... Do I have it on my table? No, I don't. I have one of the Prima sets where I've added a row in the middle of Winsor & Newton professional half pans, so I've got some pro colours out there. But again, I wanted to have a full set of professional, and I looked around at different brands, and I thought, do you know what? This is an opportunity not just to get the same Winsor & Newton paints you use in the studio out in the wild, because what will happen is you'll be painting with those 6 colours or whatever, and you'll start getting bored and you'll end up buying half pans. So what will end up happening is that for everything you've got in tube, because I work from tube normally in the studio because I just prefer it, you'll end up having a half pan, a bought half pan for every single one, and that is very expensive, so don't want to go down that road. And I started looking at other brands, and what I settled on after a lot of research was Schmincke. Now, Schmincke are a German company, and Horadam is their professional watercolour range. They have a student range as well. This is their 12 half pan set. It comes with a brush, and it's in a metal tin, and it's got a good range of colours which we'll come on to in a minute. And just to point out, this is part 1 of my reviews because I now do them in 2 parts. So this is like my first impressions. Then in a few weeks I'll come back and do a kind of, right now I've had a chance to really play with them, so that way you don't have to wait ages for me to review things, but you also get like what I think now and what I think after use. They're German made, they are really, really good quality, and I'll just read to you what they say on the packaging so that you know. They are artist quality pigments in the highest possible concentration, so they could not physically get more pigment in each paint if they tried. And what they do, which is not quite unique, but they make a big thing of it, is that they don't have, like, for example, Cotman or even Prima and Jane Davenport and so on, they have a base that they make, which has got the gum arabic and the extenders, the gum arabic and the fillers and the wetting agents and everything else in it. And then what they do is they add each pigment to that, or pigment combination to that same base. So they're all the same base regardless of the pigment. Some pigments need a bit more wetting agent than others do, which is why if you take like the Daniel Smith colours or the Winsor & Newton colours and you put certain ones onto wet paper, they will kind of move really fast and others will move really slowly. That's because the wetting agent hasn't been optimised. So this one's moving not much, this one's probably moving too fast. And what Schmincke do is they actually make a base for every pigment, so that every single one has got a very, very, very precise amount of everything. And they minimise the wetting agent that they add, the Oxgall, to be just enough so that it moves. And then it's up to you as the artist to add enough Oxgall to get the effect you want. And that's really good. It adds a lot of freedom, and I was quite pleased with that because I like the freedom of being able to add Oxgall and so on. And these are poured pans rather than extruded. And to show you what I mean by that, I'll show you an extruded pan. These Pastoral Dreams ones by Prima are actually extruded. If I can get one out, I bet I can't get one out because I've used them. No. I will link in the iCards to a video where I know I've covered that. So an extruded one is literally that they make a paste of the pigment and the gum arabic and everything else, and they remove a lot of the water by compressing it, and then they run it through a die so it comes out like a sausage, like a Play-Doh Fun Factory, and that's very, very highly concentrated pigment and everything else. And then they cut it with a metal die to make it into the individual little blocks that go in the pans or the half pans or the giant pans. And then, oh, there's an extruded block. This is burnt sienna from Winsor & Newton in a giant pan, and that's extruded really hard. Lots and lots of pigment in there. And they cut it and then they bake them to get all the water out, and they become either like leather or like rock, really, really hard. And they re-wet really easy, and they've got a really high pigment load, much more so than you get if you take a tube paint and dry it. What Schmincke do is they make a poured paint, which is kind of like Gansai Tambi, I guess, is the one that comes to mind. But what they do is they make a special combination that's not like a tube paint. They make a much more viscous one. They pour it, and then they dry them in special ovens at controlled humidity and temperature. And then they re-pour, dry again, re-pour, dry again, re-pour, dry again. So 4 pours, and then they're dried down. And then what that means is you've got these layers in the pan. You know, you can't see because you can't take them out. But that means you get a lot of pigment in there without it being an extruded one. And that's just how they've come up with a really good way to make them. So inside the box, which is a well-made box, it's a nice box actually, you get this really nice Schmincke tin, with the thumb loop on the bottom for en plein air, so you can hold it. One criticism of the tin, two criticisms of the tin that I'll come to in a minute. You get a swatch card that's actually on watercolour paper, which is a rarity and nice. And in this tin you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mixing wells on here, 3 big mixing wells on here. Comes with a brush, which we'll come on to in a moment. And then you've got your half pans, which I'll come on to again. And then you can take out that section, and then you have this pointless mixing area underneath. Why pointless? Because there's a hole here. So if you're making washes in here, it would go straight through, but you can probably mix safely if you stay away from that hole. Criticisms, this edge is razor sharp, and I've already cut myself on it. This edge is razor sharp, and I've cut myself on that as well. So I'm going to blunt those down and probably put some tape around them, because they are really sharp edges. These are nice and enamelled and clean, but those are not. And I've actually bought an empty. You can buy the same tins empty, because I wanted something that would take 12 half pans for use with some other paints I'm about to review. And this one's the same, razor sharp edges. So I will say that that you need to be really, and that edge there is also very sharp. You need to be really careful with them, or blunt them down yourself, is what I would say. And you know, it's nice, it's well made, it's strong, it's structurally rigid, it doesn't flex. The enamel is really nice, and I haven't used this, so I don't know whether it will stain. What I have done is these half pans are held in with the usual sort of spring clips that we're sort of used to, and so this case, or the empty equivalent, will take 12 half pans, but you could equally put in 6 full pans and they will fit perfectly well. You have a gap along the middle where they keep this travel brush. You could take that out. You would not get half pans in that gap. But what you could do is, for en plein air, what I use often is a particularly firm type of makeup sponge, which is very similar to the type of yellow sponge used for soldering, for cleaning the soldering iron. I will be putting a block of it in here so that I can clean the brush on it, because I find it makes it more economical with water when we're out in the field. And the paints that you get in this set are really nice, and I'm going to unwrap them and swatch them with you. I have reorganised them because the order they came in didn't suit me, because I like to have cool, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm. They were kind of in a bit of a mixed order. I know some people like to have the warms together and the cools together. I like cool, warm, and I like to have yellow, red, blue in that order. And then if I've got a green or a purple, I have that next. And again, I have cool and warm. And then I have my more yellow earth and my more red earth. And then usually there's a white and a black, which are pointless, so I take them out. But in this case, you get a brown and a black. So we'll go through them, we'll swatch them. And I'm not going to swatch them on their provided colour chart, because I want to spend a bit of time doing that off camera myself. And I'm not going to do it with their brush, because I want to review their brush a bit later when I've used it separately. It's a Da Vinci 5 round, and it unscrews nicely, and it's well made, structurally sound, screws on, it feels nice in the hand, and it's a synthetic that looks very much like Taclon. I don't think there's anything special about that. It might be nylon actually, but it's not like a sort of Daylon or Prolene type very specific synthetic. It's a generic one, and I'm not going to use that with them today, simply for that reason that I want to do a fair test of the brush. Right now I need to test the paints, and until I know how the brush performs, I can't tell whether the amount coming off the half pan for me is the brush or the paint. So we're going to do them that way round. So I've made a swatch chart of the Schmincke colours. Like, I always drop my brush just, and now I've dropped everything else. I'm just going to pick these up, but I can stay and talk to you because I can multitask. If only I knew exactly what I dropped. I know everyone jokes about my desk being messy, but it's actually not that bad. Really, it's not that bad. It's just that you see a very small area of it, so it's kind of hard to tell. Now, I'm just going to pick up these paints that have kind of kamikazed off the edge. What it is that they were sitting on a box that's off camera that you can't see, and the side of that box is just kind of squished, so they went flying. They went on a little adventure. So I'll put these back off camera, and then we'll have a little bit more space. Sorry, I didn't really prepare my area for filming today. I normally would move that off the side when I'm filming, and I didn't do it, so it's all my fault. Don't comment in the bloody comments. Tidy your desk. Fuck off. Go watch Jen Maguire if you want to see a tidy desk. Mine's a working desk, it's not tidy. So I've left myself lots of space on these swatches because I want to be able to stick the packaging in, and I want to be able to do a black pro marker test as well. I like pro marker because it's alcohol marker, so it dries really quickly. You can paint over it and it doesn't add a layer, so India ink would add a layer and you're not going to get sort of fairness. I'm going to use a small brush today, and I'm going to use a size 2/0, so 00 squirrel mop from the Renaissance Squirrel range at Pro Art, and it is a sort of traditional with a quill, although it's plastic, and the 4 copper wires with the double knots, and it is a lovely brush. I like mops. I do prefer them to be made of actual squirrel. I just find it better for me, and I like these because they're very soft. So whenever I'm testing out new paints, sorry, let me get my focus back. There we go. Whenever I'm testing out a new paint, I tend to use a squirrel brush because they're very soft, and then I've got consistency along all, and they take a lot of water, so they will allow me to get a fair amount of water on and a little bit of paint, so we can really see all the sort of shades that one can obtain. So let's start out. The cool yellow that they provide you with is Zitronengelb, lemon yellow, which is number 215 in their series. It's transparent and has a light fastness rating of 3 stars in their system. It's single pigment. It's pigment yellow 3, which is Hansa yellow 10G, which is a fairly standard cool yellow. I've just taken off the outside wrapper because it does indicate that I should turn it over, and it says on the inside, not intended for use with children. That's all it says, so I don't think there's any need for me to worry about sticking that down. And I will be let me see, do I want to keep the whole thing? I think I'm going to keep the whole thing actually, because I've got enough room to swatch underneath. So I'm using Tombow XS blue glue stick because they're really strong, and I'm finding that they also work because a lot of these have got a shiny interior. Different companies, manufacture them differently, but a lot of wrappers have a shiny interior, and I'm finding that these work fairly well. So it's got all the pigment information on the wrapper, which is always a nice thing to have, and that's why I've nicked Lindsay the Frugal Crafter's modus operandi of sticking them in, because it means you don't have to copy it down. Now I have copied it down just in case it ever falls out, and also because that's in bigger writing and I can read it, because I'm getting to that age where you have to hold it halfway across the room to be able to read it. So there is writing on the inside of the foil, so they're individually foil wrapped, and it tells me in here that it contains various different things, and I'm going to keep that because that is actually an antifungal that it contains there, so I'll keep that so that I can look it up for you guys later. And isn't that just not the most beautiful half pan? Look at that, it's poured beautifully flush with the top. It's almost a shame to use that. Let me just see if I can zoom on it for you. I mean, look at it, so beautiful. It's like a biscuit with yellow icing, but I would not recommend eating it. I'm going to pop that back into the packaging, and I won't swatch that one yet. I'm going to swatch them all at the same time because I think that would be better. Now the next one is Cadmium Gelb Hell, Cad Yellow Light, Cadmium Yellow Light to the rest of the world, and it's again single pigment PY35, which is the cadmium yellow made of cadmium zinc sulfide. Standard cad yellow you'll find in most colours. Now what happens with a lot of people, oh sorry, forgot my focus. A lot of people message me asking me about cad yellow light, cad yellow medium, cad yellow dark, cad yellow deep. What's the difference? Bottom line is really that cad lemon and cad yellow light are usually just PY35 on its own. Then you will usually get, for the cad yellow medium, it will be the same pigment, just bigger granules, so it looks a bit more intense. And then the cad yellow deeps, it will usually have either some cad red or some cad orange thrown in with it, so that again, beautiful, fits perfectly, looks like plastic, really beautiful. The problem with these is that they don't have any labelling on them that's obvious, but underneath they do actually have, like you can see there, 224. That's actually the paint number 224. So if you got them mixed up and you had your colour chart, you've got something to refer back to. I don't think that the colour strips along the packaging are remotely accurate. These are a high-end colour, but they're not so ultra high-end that they've got actually painted from the same batch swatches on the packaging, which some manufacturers do, and I'll be reviewing one of those later in the week. And I have to say, I'm really excited by those. Probably going to be crap, but I'm really excited by them because they're quite pretty. Next one is the Cool Red, which in this case is Permanent Carmine, Permanent Carmine, which is number 353. It's a semi-opaque, and it's 4 stars for its light resistance, and their light resistance goes up to 5. This is the same colour you would get elsewhere as Permanent Rose or Quinacridone Rose. It's PV19, Quinacridone Violet, and you get lots of shades of that with that pigment used by making the pigment particles big and small. That's how it's done. I'm keeping the wrappers just to see if they've all got the same antifungal in them, because I'm just kind of curious. But I recognise it from some consultancy I did a few years ago for a pigment manufacturer in my day job, that was an anti-fungal agent. I could probably tell you about it actually. I did some consultancy for a company. My day job is that I'm a bacteriologist, and I work on microbes and minerals and that sort of thing, and I do a lot of work with the mining industry. And a pigment manufacturer that actually they don't manufacture their pigment really for paint. It's used in other. It's a white pigment that's used in other products, and they had a problem with discoloration, so they got me in to figure out what was causing it, and I figured out which bacteria were doing it and sent them on their merry way. And they were actually eating the antifungal. That was what they were using to live on. So the next colour, which is the warm red, is Cadmium Rotel, Cad Red Light, 349. This is opaque, and again 4 stars. Single pigment colour again. Everything we've looked at so far is single pigment. And it's Pigment Red 108, which is cadmium red, which is the cadmium sulfoselenide. Exactly what one would expect to see. Not something unusual or surprising there. Now, I know some of you are going to be like, oh, for fuck's sake, when's he actually going to paint with them and actually swatch them out? This is boring. The reason I'm putting them all out first is just because the actual swatchy bit is really quick if I've got everything prepared. Why didn't I unwrap them off camera, some of you will be saying. The answer is some of you really like to see them being unwrapped, and some of you, and also I want to share it with you. So the next one is the Cool Blue, which is Preußisch Blau, Prussian Blue, 492. This is semi-opaque and 4 stars. And single pigment again, Pigment Blue 27, which is of course Prussian Blue. You can't really use an alternative for it, although some companies use a phthalo blue ultramarine mix. Oh, that's lovely. It's almost like obsidian. It's like black glass. Let's get you focused on that. Look at that. Isn't that just, it's like tar. It's absolutely amazing. It does feel like a real shame to have to actually use these because they're so pretty in their packaging. And I will, when I've stuck all of these down and everything, I will show them to you. And the other thing with showing you how I do this is, a lot of people ask how I do swatch charts, a lot of people ask how I store the information, and now I've got a new system that I think will actually work really well for me. I thought I'd share it. So now we've got the warm blue, which is of course ultramarine blue, and in this case it is Ultramarin Feinst, which is ultramarine extra fine. So fine would be fine, Feinst is the finest, extra fine. And it's 494. It is a transparent ultramarine, which is relatively unusual. They're usually semi-opaque. And it is a 4-star for light fastness. And of course it is Pigment Blue 29 Ultramarine, again a single pigment. Most of this set are single pigments. There is only one paint in this set that is not a single pigment. And that I find pretty reassuring, I have to say. I mean, they're Schmincke. You expect really high quality, but high quality doesn't always mean single pigment. Keep that in mind. Right, I'll just put them into their springy things properly. And then I'll move on to the bottom row. And so these are all the primaries done, and we'll move into the secondaries and the earths. Or the secondaries and the neutrals, I should say. These are so far all colours I like. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Hansa Yellow as the cool yellow. I like a lemon yellow. I like a sort of a Nicolazo sorry, I don't mean that. I mean a sort of nickel titanate lemon yellow is what I really like. Lemon yellow deep, like a neodymium containing colour, they're often nice, but I can live with Hansa yellow. All the others are what I like to have. Whilst I often use a transparent yellow, so a transparent yellow is the name of the colour here, which is a nickel azo yellow, as a warm yellow. I actually like the cadmiums a lot. It's just that more recently I've been trying to use something a bit more transparent in that particular position in my palette, but these will be interesting to use. So the next one up is Phthalo Green, and this one is Pigment Green 7, Phthalocyanine Green Blue shade. There is another, well, there's several other phthalo greens, which I won't go into, and again, beautifully poured pan, and they're almost, the pans are a work of art. The labels are beautiful. There's something incredibly sophisticated about these Schmincke sets. Now, what I will do in terms of the product, because a lot of you will want to buy it, I will put links, as always, in the video description. I didn't actually get this from my usual vendor or dealer, Amazon. I actually used Cornelison, which are a company of colourmen, so they make pigments in London, and their shop is just the most amazing place to go if you're into your pigments. And the reason was simply that I was trying to make up an order so that the postage wouldn't be extortionate, and I was looking through all the other things and I saw these, and it was a little bit more expensive than it would have been on Amazon, but I thought bugger it, I'm buying it anyway. So you can expect to be paying around £50 to £60 for this set in the UK. It's not cheap. So for 12 colours, what's that, £5 per half pan? You'd be paying that with Winsor & Newton. They're not actually that expensive, but they don't kind of take the colour down because you bought them in a set, whereas if you buy WN, often if you buy a set, a little bit cheaper. So the kind of more earthy green, which surprised me a little bit in its composition, is Permanent Grün Olive, Permanent Green Olive, and that is 534, and it's a semi-opaque, and it's 4 stars again. This is a mixed colour, so actually I was lying earlier on when I said that everything was single pigment. It's not quite true. 2 of them are mixes. This one's a mixture of Pigment Orange 62 and Pigment Green 7, which is Phthalocyanine Green Blue shade again. Pigment Orange 62, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll add a screen at this point in the video to tell you what it is. Okay, it's just because I'd forgotten to write it when I was going through them with the colour index earlier on. I have failed, and I can't remember the oranges off the top of my head, so that one's gone. I don't remember what it is. Now we're on to the earths, and yellow ochre in German is lichte Ocher, light ochre, or lighter ochre, but it is yellow ochre, and it's a 5-star for light fastness. It is 655, it's semi-opaque, and it is Pigment Yellow 42, single pigment again, which is yellow iron oxide, hydrated. So it's rust, basically, but it's actually a form of clay. Originally it was a form of clay, but it's the same hydrated iron that you find in clay and associated to certain minerals, but it is the same as you would find in rust. And it looks like caramel. You could almost eat the pigment. It's so delicious looking. I actually am really loving these poured pans. It's not something I get to use very often because I pour my own, but I don't do them quite so pretty. I just slop it in and use it. The next one is the wonderfully ambiguously named English Venezianisch Rot, which they've translated as English Red on the packaging, but obviously they've actually translated it as English Venetian Red, which is correct, but in the French and the Spanish translation they've just translated it as Venetian Red. So I'm expecting it to be kind of somewhere in between English Red and Venetian Red, which are technically different colours. A lot of people don't realise that English Red, Venetian Red, Indian Red, they're all actually different. They're the same pigment. They're usually Pigment Red 101 or Pigment Red 102, which are the red iron oxides. In this case it's Red 101 synthetic red iron oxide, which is actually just the same pigment used in yellow ochre, just dried out. It hasn't got water of hydration. That's the only difference. And it's 619 and it's 5-star again, and it's an opaque, which is what you would expect an English red or a Venetian red to be. And one of the reasons a lot of people don't like them is that they've got a very nice colour, very nice hue, but the opacity can make them rather flat, and that's why they're somewhat unpopular. The next one is Sepia Brown, 663, which is a semi-opaque, 4-star for light fastness, and this one is a triple pigment colour. So everything in the set, there's 10 single pigments, one dual pigment and one triple pigment, and this is comprised of pigment blue 15:1, which is phthalo blue red shade, pigment black 9 bone black, and pigment brown 7, which is brown iron oxide. So again, that's a slightly different iron oxide to both of these two, but it's in there. And of course, this is usually, sepia is usually synthetic nowadays, because it used to be squid ink. You can still get it if you really want squid ink, but usually it's been synthetically made, and that's kind of nice, because I've used that, well, I've never used actual squid ink to paint with, but I've used it in cookery, and it is quite granular, and it is quite granulating, I would say. Actually, it would probably be when painting, so it's quite nice that they put in the black in here, because that will give it a granulation. So you've got the brown, and then you've got a blue undertone, which keeps it very cool, and that makes it probably quite a lot like the real thing, so rather pleased with that. And the final colour, which has got the most wonderful name in German, Elfenbeinschwarz, which is ivory black, and that translates because Elfenbein, which literally is elf legs, is ivory in German. It's kind of a corruption though, because it's a corruption of the High German word, which means elf bone, which became corrupted and is now elf legs, because they sound very similar. It's a 5-star again for light fastness, single pigment, pigment black 9, bone black, so it's not ivory black, it's actually bone black that they've used. Ivory black is a slightly different pigment, and it's semi-opaque. So let's see how these actually perform. The moment you've all been waiting for. I just want to try and get them in their springy things a little bit more strongly. I have to say the razor sharp nature of this tin is actually bothering me a little bit. I'm not enjoying using it, so I'm going to pop out some black pro marker, because I want some squares of black background that I can work over. And I did toy with cutting a little stencil from cardboard using a tiny square die that I've got, and then using it so that I always got a perfect square, but I don't need my swatch cards to be that pretty, and this one's pretty pretty for me. This is kind of halfway between the Jen Maguire, Christina Werner style swatching and the Lindsay the Frugal Crafter and Dr. Bowden Spin Doctor style swatching, because we're a little bit more, it needs to be functional, it doesn't need to be that beautiful, but these are. So I've got really nice clean water, and I've just cleaned my brush thoroughly first. So first of all, let's do Citron Gelb, and these apparently lift really easily. Yeah, they do. That's really very pretty. I quite like that. My thoughts will kind of come on the colours as I work through them. They need a moment always to just sort of dry down a bit, because remember, watercolour dries lighter, so you really need to sort of see how it goes. That kind of repelling, oh, if you can see it, I doubt you can, over the black is kind of an artifact of the fact that the black ink isn't quite dry and it's on a hot press, that's all. So wouldn't worry too much about that. So that's the cad yellow down. That was really easy to get out of the off of the half pan. I mean, these are re-wetting beautifully. Now on to the permanent carmine. That is pretty. And these go a long way. I mean, they really are being honest when they say that they've got, like, they couldn't squeeze more pigment in if they like. My paint water, which is a huge, like, 1 litre jar, has gone very, very orange already. And I've just washed it, so that's annoying. Ooh, that is a really good opaque cad red. I probably put it on a little bit thinly, so the... oh wow, that's really taken up the colour of the paint water now. It's gone really red. So it isn't quite covering that as much as it might, but it is looking good. Remember, I haven't sprayed these with water or anything before. Oh, that is a nice Prussian blue. It's quite a light Prussian blue. It's got a bit of a phthalo blue look to it, but of course it is Prussian, most definitely. That is a much lighter Prussian blue than I'm used to, so that must have been ground in a very different way to normal. Now we've got the ultramarine. A very standard looking hue to the ultramarine, but it is indeed transparent, as they say. I'll be interested to see what the granulation is like on that, because obviously I haven't put any notes on granulation on my notes, because I know that these three are going to granulate, and probably the Earth's will. I haven't really bothered to write it on there. Next up, the phthalo green blue shade. It's a fairly standard phthalo green in terms of hue. It moves quite nicely in the water. I think it's quite pretty. It's not too overpowering as a lot of phthalo greens are. And this is that mixture of phthalo green with an orange to give us this permanent olive green. And that's actually a really nice green. I could see that that would be useful. Problem with a lot of greens out of tubes is that you have to add yellow ochre to them because they're just a bit too vivid for real life, but that's a nice one. Okay, the yellow ochre is lifted really easily off the pan, but it's also sucked up water a little bit and gone a bit sticky almost instantly. So that's something I need to kind of play with a little bit more, but it's a nice yellow ochre. It's not too flat. Like I said about the English red, Venetian red earlier, one of the problems with a lot of them is they're very flat. They don't have much life to them, and again, that's the same. It's got a lovely granulation to it, and it hasn't just come out completely flat like I'm painting emulsion paint or something over the paper. We'll have a look at how that looks when it's dried down a little bit more. Now the sepia brown. Oh, that is nice. That actually does look like actual squid ink. I'm going to put a little bit more out. It's got a lovely granulation to it. The black is really heavy, large particles of black. So let's let it dry down and see if they separate out a little bit. And last, but by no means least, the actual black. You know, I often think blacks are a little bit useless when you get them in a watercolour set, because obviously I like chromatic neutrals. See my video up there on chromatic neutrals. But they're useful for adding into mixes to kind of give them a bit of shadow or a bit of granulation. If you put it into something like phthalo green, you would get some interesting effects. I like those a lot. I'm really quite enamoured with some of these colours, like this one. I'm a bit disappointed with the permanent carmine. It has gone a bit flat when it dried down. It didn't maintain the vividness that I was hoping it would. The cadmium red has got a nice granulation. I mean, okay, these blooms are just because of an artifact of the fact that there was quite a lot of water on there, so it's kind of done that. These earth tones are not flat. They've got lovely granulation. They've got a nice bit of texture to them, very much like the ultramarine, and that is a transparent ultramarine, just like they say. The opaque colours are supposed to be the cad red and the English red, but actually I can see the black really well through both of them, so I'm going to put another layer, a thick layer, of cad red over that and see if that will actually dry opaque. I don't think it will. I think they're very finely ground, so true opacity might be hard to achieve. And we'll do it with that one as well. Just pop a little bit on. There's a lot of pigment in these. I feel like I'm wasting it because it's going into the paint water really strongly. And we'll just sort of do as a test. Let's put some more of that Hansa yellow, lemon yellow, because that's supposed to be transparent. We'll put that over it and see if that dries transparent still. I like them a lot. I really like the texture. I like the aesthetic of them in the box. Because, you know, we're artists. We like a bit of prettiness. They're great. I really do like them a lot. I'm going to just try out their own brush now to do a little bit of colour mixing, because I want to see what these are really capable of. And I'm just going to look for a scrap of watercolour paper, because I obviously don't want to use anything I actually care about. I'm going to use just this little bit of watercolour paper here that's left over from some Prima studies. And now I know that these lift really easily with Squirrel, which is very soft. Let's see how they cope with Taclon-y kind of stuff. And I'm going to put down some water first of all. This is a, I think it's a Saunders Waterford. Put down a sort of L shape of water, and I'm going to take a cool yellow and drop some of that in, and it's picking up really well on this brush, which is a little bit harder to clean than Squirrel. It's, yeah, a little bit harder to get the pigment out of. I'm going to take some of that carmine and let the two mingle a little bit. I'm just going to do the cool colours. I'm not going to do the hot ones, because I'll do and the Prussian blue. The reason being that I will do, when I do my sort of part 2, I will do lots of triads of colours, and then you'll be able to really appreciate what you can do with them. But I just want to just see how well they mix first of all, as I don't like these videos to be more than about 45 minutes long. Okay, and I'll just mix up the two there. So what you get if you mix a cool yellow with a cool red is a very earthy orange usually, and that is indeed, let's do a zoom in and a focus. So we've got a very earthy orange there, but it's that very typical cool red, cool yellow kind of earthy granular orange. Got a nice earthy green that could be useful there, that would work, and this gorgeous, as always, this beautiful wine lavender fantastic violet that you always get when you have a cool red and a cool blue together. So they mix really well, they mix really easily, they're not separating out of the mix, but they have got texture in the mixes, and I really like that. So obviously in my part 2 review I will be doing some proper swatches. I will do a full set of, let me get my focus right, I will do a full set of triads. I will do mixing triads for all the different possible combinations that one can from here, and I will paint out the watercolour paper swatches, because this is a textured paper. It's not a cold press, but it is a textured paper. This was hot press. I like hot press for swatching, and the reason is that everything looks its worst. If I did this on rough, not even cold press, but rough, everything would look very good. And everything would look very good because you've added texture, because you're using an ultra rough paper. So by using a cold press, everything kind of looks a bit crap, and it allows you to see it at its worst. Now they're drying down, I will say that I do think quite strongly that that permanent carmine is very dull. If you think about how a lot of cool reds actually look, how actually there's some Daniel Smith ones here, let's compare them. So if you just look at that Daniel Smith Quin Rose with the same pigment, this has got a lot more vividness and life to it than this one here. So I do think there is quite a big difference there. And this is a transparent, whereas this one's a semi-opaque. So this one's evidently not as finely ground. I do think that, this is a Hansa Yellow 10G as well. And these are fairly similar. There's not a lot of difference there. The ultramarines, this one is a transparent one, so there's more paper showing through, which makes this look a bit insipid, which is possibly the issue here. Maybe if I put more on, maybe it would look different. This one is much deeper and darker. So that was just a little very quick side-by-side comparison. Obviously, when I do my part 2, I will compare with other brands as well. But I'll bring these up to the camera just so that you can get a little look at them. I think they're really pretty. They went on so easily, and I really like them. So there is our lemon yellow, cad yellow light, permanent carmine, cad red light, Prussian blue, let's just get the focus right, ultramarine extra fine, phthalo green blue shade, permanent green olive. I'm going to have to do these ones upside down because of the legs of the tripod. Yellow ochre, English Venetian red, sepia, and ivory black. So you can get an idea of what those colours are like. I do think there's a little bit of flatness with some of them, and I do think that's an artefact of them being so finely ground. One of the things you often notice with paints is the finer you grind them, the more grey they get. So if you were to take a mineral like malachite, which is a beautiful bright green, and grind it fairly coarsely, you'll get a bright green watercolour. Grind it very finely and you'll get a grey watercolour. Sorry, my light's being silly. Let me just flick it off a moment. Same goes for various other colours. If you grind them too finely, lapis lazuli, you'll get a beautiful blue. Grind it too finely, you get a grey. So it does come through as an artifact very now and again that... oops, forgot to change my focus again there and zoom back out. So it is kind of a known issue, and that could be one of the reasons some of these have got that tiny insipidness to them. But we will see. And what I'm going to do with these is use them for a couple of weeks and do a part 2 review. So I hope you found this useful. If you want to buy any of the Schmincke paints, I've put some links in the video description for you for UK, USA and Canadian Amazon. You may find them cheaper elsewhere, and if you do and it's somewhere that you can order online, post in the comments and I'll let you know. If you've got any of the Schmincke sets, particularly the bigger ones, let me know what you think of them, and I will possibly review one of the larger ones at some point. Just to let you know, I did pay £55, which is about $70 for these, and that was in Cornellison in London. Really? I would probably be paying about 45 to 50 on Amazon UK, so they were a little bit more there. That was just because I needed it to make the postage up on another order that I was doing for the company. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and good evening.